It all started with something so small that I never imagined it would spiral into the kind of situation that would make me question the sanity of my entire neighborhood. You'd think people in a suburban community would have better things to do with their time, but apparently, knocking over someone's trash can have become a hobby for at least one person on my street. And not just any person. Oh no, this wasn't some random kid playing a prank or a raccoon looking for scraps. This was Karen. And if you've never met a real-life Karen before, let me just tell you, they're every bit as bad as the memes make them out to be, and then some. This woman was a self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, the enforcer of rules that no one else cared about, and she had a talent for turning the smallest inconveniences into world-ending catastrophes. At first, I thought it was an accident. Maybe the wind knocked over my trash can. After all, the weather that day had been a little gusty, and I lived near the end of the street where the houses curve around like a horseshoe. It made sense that a strong wind could have blown the can over. So I just picked it up, shrugged it off, and went about my day. The second time, I started to suspect something. It was calm that day, barely a breeze in the air. And yet there was again my trash can lying on its side like a casualty of war, garbage spilling out across the curb. I cleaned it up, annoyed but not furious, because hey, maybe it really was an accident. A dog, perhaps, or maybe even some kids who didn't know any better. But then it happened a third time, and this time I had proof. My neighbor across the street, Dave, came over while I was picking up a trail of soda cans that had rolled down the gutter and said, "You know, Karen's been doing that on purpose, right?" I froze mid-bend, a crumpled aluminum can in my hand. I must have looked like an idiot, because Dave chuckled before he continued. "Saw her do it this morning. She walked right up, looked around like she was in some kind of spy movie, and then just kicked it over like it owed her money." I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh and say he was joking. But the grin on his face wasn't playful. It was a grin of someone who had just dropped a truth bomb and was waiting to see the explosion. "Why?" I finally asked, though I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear the answer. Dave shrugged like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "She says your trash can is an eyesore. Says it violates the HOA guidelines or some crap." I nearly laughed, because if you'd seen my trash can, you'd know it looked like every other trash can on the street. Same size, same color, same everything. There was nothing unique about it, unless, of course, Karen had some special vendetta against perfectly normal trash receptacles. At that point, I probably should have gone straight to the HOA, filed a complaint, and let them deal with her. That would have been the reasonable thing to do. But if there's one thing you need to know about me, it's that I have a stubborn streak a mile wide. When someone messes with me, I don't just take it lying down. No, I make sure they regret ever thinking I was an easy target. So I smiled, thanked Dave for the heads up, and started planning. That night, as I sat in my living room nursing a cold beer and watching reruns of some mindless sitcom, I started thinking about Karen. The way she strutted around the neighborhood like she owned the place, barking orders at anyone who dared to step out of line. She was the type of person who lived for control, who thrived on making other people miserable just to feel powerful. And I knew one thing for sure. If I want to get her back, I had to do it in a way that she would never see coming. It had to be subtle, creative, and above all, satisfying. The next morning, I set my alarm an hour earlier than usual. Not because I had somewhere to be, but because I had a plan to put into motion. I pulled up my security camera feed and made sure everything was working perfectly. Then, I placed my trash can exactly where it always sat, at the edge of the curb, neat and proper, lid closed tight. And then I waited. Sure enough, like clockwork, Karen appeared. She strutted down the sidewalk in her pastel sweater and oversized sunglasses, clutching a leash with her little yappy dog prancing beside her. I watched from behind my curtains as she approached my trash can, glanced around to make sure no one was watching, and then, wham! She kicked it over like a soccer ball. Trash spilled out onto the curb, and Karen just walked away like nothing happened, her little dog trotting happily beside her. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about a trash can. This was about power. Karen wanted to assert her dominance over the neighborhood, and I was the unlucky guy she'd chosen to make an example of, but she didn't know me. She didn't know that when someone pushes me, I push back twice as hard. Over the next few days, I started researching. Not just any research. I went deep. I read about HOA regulations, neighborhood bylaws, and even local ordinances. If Karen was going to play the rulebook game, I was going to beat her at her own game. But I didn't stop there. I also started brainstorming ways to turn the tables in a way that would make her think twice before messing with me again. At first, I thought about something simple, like gluing the trash can to the curb or filling it with concrete, so she couldn't knock it over. But then I realized something that would just escalate things. Karen was the kind of person who would call the cops over a mailbox that didn't match the HOA-approved color. If I went that route, I'd end up a fine or worse, a lawsuit. No, I needed something smarter. Something that would make her stop in her tracks and wonder what the hell just happened. That's when the idea hit me. It came to me late at night as I was scrolling through videos online, watching people build all sorts of crazy contraptions for fun. One video in particular caught my eye. A guy had built a fake trash can that sprayed water at anyone who touched it. I laughed at first, but then I thought, why stop at water? Why not make something truly unforgettable? Something that would scare the living daylights out of Karen without actually hurting her? Something that would teach her a lesson she'd never forget. And that's when I started planning the ultimate revenge trash can. Once I had the idea cemented in my head, I knew I couldn't just half-ass this. If I was going to do it, I had to do it right. Karen wasn't the type to back down easily, and if my prank didn't land perfectly, it would just embolden her to keep pushing. That meant precision, planning, and execution that would make even the most dedicated DIYer proud. The first step was figuring out exactly what kind of trap I wanted to build. It couldn't be something that would cause harm, because as tempting as it was to picture Karen covered in mud or tripping face first into the street, I didn't need a lawsuit on top of all this drama. No, it had to be legal, non-lethal, but unforgettable. I sat down at my workbench in the garage, grabbed a notepad, and started sketching. At first, it was simple, a trash can that sprayed water when touched. But then I thought, why stop there? Water was fine, but Karen would just get wet and complain louder than ever. I needed something that would scare her, something that would make her question her life choices, if only for a moment. That's when the second idea hit me. Sound. Loud. Startling sound. Imagine this. Karen tips the trash can over, and suddenly an ear-piercing alarm goes off, maybe even a voice screaming something unexpected. That would definitely get her heart racing. But again, I didn't want to stop there. I wanted layers. Layers of chaos that would all hit at once, leaving her completely flustered and hopefully too embarrassed to ever try this stunt again. I decided on a 3-part system: water, sound, and visuals. The water would come first, a sudden spray that would catch her off guard, then the sound, an alarm so loud it would echo down the street, and finally, the visuals. The piece de resistance, a fake snake that would spring out when the lid was lifted, realistic enough to make her think she just disturbed a deadly predator. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just revenge. It was art. Pure, unfiltered suburban justice. So I got to work. First stop, the hardware store. I walked down those aisles like a man on a mission, grabbing everything I needed: PVC pipes, a small water pump, a motion sensor, a battery pack, and a timer relay. For the sound, I picked up a compact but ridiculously loud alarm system, the kind meant for home security setups. As for the snake, I ordered the most realistic rubber snake I could find online, complete with a coiled body and menacing eyes. When I got home, I cleared off the workbench and started assembling my masterpiece. It wasn't easy. I'm handy, but this was on another level. I drilled holes, ran wires, and tested circuits until everything worked seamlessly. The water pump was hooked up to a small reservoir I hid in the bottom of the can, with the nozzle aimed upward, so that when triggered, it would shoot a sharp burst of water at whoever tipped it over. The alarm was rigged to the motion sensor, which I positioned so that any significant tilt would set it off. And the snake? Oh! The snake was my favorite part. I rigged it with a spring mechanism inside the lid, so that when the cameras moved a certain way, the lid would pop open, launching the snake outward in a terrifying arc. It was beautiful. By the time I finished, it looked like any ordinary trash can, innocent, unassuming, and completely unsuspecting. But inside, it was a technological marvel designed to deliver pure chaos. I even added a little extra touch, a small waterproof speaker that would play a pre-recorded message when the alarm went off. After debating a few options, I settled on the phrase, "Step away from the trash can," in a deep, robotic voice. It was just the right mix of absurd and intimidating. Once everything was assembled and tested, I positioned Kim back in its usual spot by the curb. My heart was pounding like I was pulling off a heist. I knew Karen's routine. She walked her dog every morning at around 7:30, and she couldn't resist taking her little detour past my house. All I had to do now was wait. The next morning, I woke up early, made a cup of coffee, and set up my phone to record the action from the living room window. I felt like one of those wildlife photographers waiting for a rare animal to appear. And sure enough, right on schedule, there she was, Karen in her pastel sweater, sunglasses perched on her head, her little demon dog prancing beside her. She walked with that same air of superiority, like she was inspecting the kingdom she ruled with an iron fist. I could barely contain my excitement as she approached the trash can. She glanced around, just like she always did, making sure the coast was clear. Then, with the confidence of someone who had never faced consequences in her life, she reached out with her foot and gave it a little shove. What happened next was pure poetry. The moment the can tipped past the trigger point, the water pump sprang to life, sending a sharp spray of water right at her legs. She yelped in surprise, stumbling back, but before she could even process what happened, the alarm went off, blaring at full volume with that deep robotic voice booming, "Step away from the trash can." Karen froze, eyes wide with shock, her dog barking like crazy at the sudden noise. And then, the grand finale, the lid of the trash can flew open and out shot the fake snake, coiled and hissing as it sailed through the air. Karen screamed, a full, high-pitched shriek that echoed down the street, and nearly tripped over her dog as she scrambled backward. For a split second, she just stood there, drenched, trembling, and staring at the rubber snake like it was a cobra that had just leaped out of the underworld. Then, without a word, she turned on her heel and bolted, dragging her poor dog behind her. I sat there in my living room, tears streaming down my face from laughing so hard. It was perfect. Every second of it was pure gold, and I had it all on video. Karen didn't show her face for the rest of that day, and honestly, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd learned her lesson. I figured the embarrassment alone would keep her from ever touching my trash can again. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The very next morning, as I sipped my coffee and scrolled through the news, I heard a sound that made my stomach tighten. A sharp bang, like plastic hitting the pavement. I looked out the window, and there it was, my trash can lying on its side, the lid flung open, but this time the alarm wasn't blaring. The water pump was bone dry. The snake was gone, and the motion sensor had been ripped out. She'd sabotaged it. For a second, I was stunned, not just because she'd messed with my creation, but because of what it meant. Karen wasn't scared. She was angry. And that meant this wasn't over. It was war. I stepped outside, pretended to check the mail, and saw the aftermath up close. The wires were cut clean, like she'd brought scissors just for this. The fake snake was nowhere to be seen, which made me wonder if she'd kept it as some kind of twisted trophy. I almost laughed at the thought, but deep down, I knew this was about to get ugly. That evening, as I put the trash can back in its spot, now just a regular, defeated can once more, I saw Karen across the street. She stood there with her arms crossed, a smug little smile on her face, like she'd just won the neighborhood Olympics. Her dog was yapping at my lawn, but she didn't look away. If looks could talk, hers said, "Game over." But I wasn't about to let it be game over. Not yet. Later that night, I started brainstorming again. The problem was, I couldn't use the same trick twice. She'd be ready for it. I needed something new, something bigger, something that would hit her where it hurt the most, her pride. And that's when it hit me. I didn't need another prank. I needed to expose her. The next day, I upgraded my security system. I installed 2 more cameras, one on the garage and one angled toward the street. If she so much as looked at my trash can, I'd catch it in 4K. And then I waited. It didn't take long. 2 days later, she struck again, but this time, she didn't just knock over the can. No, this time she came prepared, armed with a clipboard and a camera of her own. She took pictures of the trash can from every angle, like it was a crime scene, and then scribbled notes on her clipboard. I didn't know what she was up to, but I had a feeling it wasn't good. Sure enough, that evening, I got the email. Subject line, HOA notice of violation. The message was full of legal-sounding jargon, but the gist of it was simple. According to the HOA, my trash can was not stored in accordance with community guidelines and needed to be moved out of sight immediately or I'd face fines. I stared at the email, my blood boiling. She'd actually filed a complaint. Not only that, but she'd included photos she'd taken herself as evidence. And just like that, I realized this wasn't just about a trash can anymore. Karen wanted to control me. She wanted to make an example out of me, just like she probably had with a dozen other neighbors. But she didn't realize something. She had picked the wrong guy. I wasn't about to roll over and let her win. That night, I dug out the HOA handbook, the same one I'd tossed in the drawer the day I moved in and never looked at again. I read every single page, every line, every clause. And then I found it, the golden ticket. Buried in the fine print was a clause that said trash cans had to be neatly stored and out of sight from the street, except on designated collection days. But here's the kicker. It didn't say where they had to be stored. As long as they weren't visible from the street, it was fair game. That gave me an idea so good it made me grin like a madman at 2 a.m. The next morning, I got to work. I built an enclosure for my trash can, but not just any enclosure. This thing was a fortress. I used heavy-duty wood panels, painted it the exact same color as my house, and even added a little roof with shingles so it looked like a miniature shed. When I was done, it was so nice it could have been a feature in a home improvement magazine. I positioned it in my side yard, tucked behind a privacy fence, completely invisible from the street. In other words, 100% HOA compliant. But I didn't stop there. Oh no, I had something special planned for Karen. Remember those extra cameras I installed? I set them up to not only record, but also live stream. And then I created a private Facebook group for the neighborhood and titled it Community Watch. I invited everyone on the block, everyone except Karen. And when they joined, I posted a video of her kicking over my trash can, cutting the wires, stealing the fake snake, and strutting away like a villain in a bad soap opera. The comments section blew up instantly. People were tagging each other, laughing, and posting popcorn emojis. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Karen had terrorized. Story after story poured in about her harassing people over mailbox colors, threatening fines for having the wrong kind of garden gnome, even yelling at kids for riding bikes too fast. By the end of the day, the whole neighborhood knew exactly who Karen really was. And that was just the beginning. The next HOA meeting was chaos. I didn't even have to say a word. The video did all the talking for me. People were furious, demanding answers, calling for her removal from the board. Karen sat there red-faced, stammering about community standards and respect for the rules, but no one was buying it. It was glorious. I thought that would be the end of it. I really did. But Karen wasn't the type to go down without a fight. 2 days later, I found a note taped to my door in big, angry letters. This isn't over. And just like that, I knew the war was far from finished. Karen didn't just get mad, she got strategic. After that HOA meeting where the video of her tantrum went viral in the neighborhood group, I figured she'd crawl back into her McMansion, lick her wounds, and maybe, just maybe, reflect on her life choices. But no, Karen was like a storm that only grew stronger after every blow. Within 48 hours, my email inbox was flooded with HOA notices. Not one, not two, seven. 7 separate violation letters for everything from grass length exceeding community standards to unapproved lawn ornament placement. I didn't even have a damn lawn ornament. It was obvious what this was. A scorched earth campaign to drown me in fines until I either bent the knee or moved out. But here's the thing about me. The more someone tries to break me, the stronger I dig in my heels. So, instead of panicking, I smiled. Because this was exactly what I wanted. Proof of harassment. And oh boy, was she handed it to me gift wrapped. I saved every email, every letter. I even recorded the phone call when she called me personally, her voice dripping with fake politeness as she reminded me of the HOA rules. She didn't know it, but every word was ammunition, and I was stockpiling it like I was preparing for war. But Karen wasn't done. A few days later, I came home to find a police car parked in front of my house. My heart skipped for a second, not because I'd done anything wrong, but because of how far I knew Karen was willing to go. Sure enough, the officer walked up to me with a notepad and said, "Sir, we receive a report that you are threatening your neighbor." Threatening? Me? I almost laughed in his face. I kept my cool, explained the situation, and even showed him the video of Karen vandalizing my trash can. His eyebrows shot up so high, they practically hit his hat brim. "Huh," he said, clearly annoyed that his time was being wasted. "Looks like she left that part out." He closed his notepad and said, "Sorry to bother you. Have a good day." As he drove off, I stood there in my driveway, staring at Karen's house across the street. Her blinds twitched like she was watching from inside, smug and satisfied. And that's when I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just going to win this battle. I was going to end the war. Permanently. That night, I sat at my computer and started drafting my plan. It wasn't a prank this time. It wasn't even about the trash can anymore. This was about exposing Karen for who she really was, a petty, power-hungry tyrant who thought she could bully everyone into submission. And the best part? I was going to do it in a way that no one, not even Karen, could stop. First, I called my lawyer. Yes, I have a lawyer, my cousin Mike, who specializes in property law and owes me a favor after I helped him move his entire gun safe collection last year. I explained everything. Sent him the video evidence, the emails, the HOA notices, and even the recording of Karen's phone call. He called me back an hour later, and his exact words were, "Holy crap, dude, this is gold. She screwed 6 ways from Sunday." Turns out, Karen had broken multiple HOA bylaws, and even a few state harassment laws. Filing false reports with the police? Big no-no. Destroying property? Another strike. Mike told me we could not only get her removed from the HOA board, but also hit her with a harassment claim that would make her life miserable. I liked the sound of that, but I wasn't satisfied with just legal action. No, I wanted something poetic. Something that would make Karen think twice before ever messing with anyone again. So, while Mike drafted the paperwork, I set my own plan into motion. Step 1, gather more dirt. I started talking to neighbors, the ones who had vented in the Facebook group about Karen's antics. I listened to their stories, collected their screenshots, and documented everything. By the time I was done, I had a folder so thick it could have been used as a doorstop. Step 2, the big reveal. But I wasn't going to just dump all this information online and hope for the best. No, I wanted an audience. A big one. And then it hit me. The HOA's annual community barbecue was coming up. Every single homeowner would be there, including Karen, who prided herself on organizing the damn thing every year. It was perfect. I RSVP'd with the sweetest smile I could muster and spent the next few days preparing my presentation. That's right, I said presentation. I'm talking full PowerPoint, complete with photos, videos, and bullet points. I even threw in some background music to make it dramatic. By the time I was done, it looked like something out of a Netflix true crime documentary. The day of the barbecue arrived, and the neighborhood park was buzzing with chatter, the smell of burgers and hot dogs filling the air. Karen was in her element, flitting from table to table in a floral dress, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. I kept my cool, mingled with a few neighbors, and waited for the right moment. And when Karen finally grabbed a microphone to make her usual speech about community pride and upholding standards, I stepped forward and said, "Actually, Karen, I think the community deserves to see something first." I pulled out my laptop, hooked it up to the projector they were using for the raffle announcements, and hit play. What followed was 15 minutes of pure, unadulterated Karen exposure. The video of her kicking over my trash can played first, followed by screenshots of her threatening emails, recordings of her fake violation calls, and even clips of other neighbors sharing their horror stories. The crowd went silent at first, then gasped, then erupted into whispers. Karen's face turned redder than a ripe tomato. She tried to grab the mic, tried to shut it down, but it was too late. The truth was out, and everyone had seen it. By the end, people were booing her. Someone even yelled, "Step away from the trash can," and the whole park burst into laughter. Karen stormed off, humiliated, her perfect suburban queen image shattered. But I wasn't done yet, because what she didn't know was that while she was getting roasted in public, Mike had just filed a harassment claim. And as soon as the HOA board saw that presentation, they called an emergency vote. The result? Karen was officially removed from the board before the night was over. For the first time in weeks, I slept like a baby, but something told me Karen wasn't done. Not yet. I thought it was over after the barbecue. Karen had been stripped of her HOA power, humiliated in front of the entire neighborhood, and slapped with a harassment claim that Mike assured me was airtight. Most people would have waved a white flag and disappeared quietly into the shadows. But Karen wasn't most people. No, Karen was like a villain in a bad sequel. Angrier, more desperate, and ready to burn the whole neighborhood down if that's what it took. For a few days, things were quiet. Too quiet. The kind of calm that makes you nervous because you know it's just the eye of a storm. And then one night it happened. I woke up to the sound of movement outside. Soft footsteps, like someone trying not to be heard. At first, I thought it was an animal. But when I glanced at the security monitor on my nightstand, my stomach clenched. There she was, Karen, dressed in black, like a wannabe ninja, crouched next to my driveway, and fumbling with something near my garage. I stared at the screen in disbelief. This woman had lost her mind. I hit record on the camera feed and slipped quietly out of bed, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to run out there and confront her, but another part, the smarter part, told me to wait. I watched as she pulled out a can of spray paint and started tagging my garage door with big, angry letters. Trash rat. I almost laughed out loud. Trash rat? That was the best she could come up with? But then I saw what she did next, and my amusement turned to fury. She walked over to my trash can, the brand new, fully compliant one-eyed place in its fancy enclosure, and started yanking at it like a maniac. She pulled so hard she broke the latch on the enclosure and dragged the can out into the street. And then, with all the strength her Pilates-toned arm could muster, she shoved it into the middle of the road and started jumping on it, stomping like a toddler throwing a tantrum. I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped on a hoodie, grabbed my phone, and walked outside, recording the whole thing. "Having fun, Karen?" I said, my voice calm but loud enough to make her freeze mid-stomp. She whipped around, her face pale, her eyes wide like a deer caught in headlights. For a second, she just stood there, breathing hard, spray paint in one hand, a wild look in her eyes. This is your fault," she sputtered. "You humiliated me. You ruined everything." I kept recording every second of her meltdown. "You broke into my property," I said evenly. "You vandalized my house. You damaged my trash can. And you did it all on camera." I pointed the security camera mounted on the garage. Karen followed my gaze, and when she saw the little red recording light blinking at her, something inside her snapped. She dropped the spray paint and bolted, sprinting down the street like her life depended on it. I let her go. I didn't need to chase her. I already had everything I needed. The next morning, I sent the footage to Mike. He called me back 10 minutes later, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "Dude," he said between chuckles, "she's done. Absolutely done." And he was right. Between the HOA removal, the harassment claim, and now this felony-level vandalism stunt, Karen had dug herself a hole so deep she'd need a mining crew to climb out. Within a week, she was served with a restraining order and slapped with charges for trespassing and property damage. The HOA even voted to fine her for violating community guidelines. Ironic, considering she used to enforce them like a dictator. But the best part? The best part was the trash can. See, After she destroyed the last one, I decided to replace it with something special. Something Karen would never see coming, even if she tried. So I commissioned a custom-made trash can, a massive, gleaming stainless steel beast that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. It had motion-activated lights, a locking lid, and a built-in camera disguised as a decorative emblem. But that wasn't the best feature. The best feature was the engraving. Right across the front, in big, bold letters, it said, "Property of the county." Not the HOA. The county. Why? Because a little research told me that trash collection in our area was managed by a county contract, which meant HOA had zero jurisdiction over official county property. And this bad boy, it was classified as county property the moment I registered it with the Waste Management Department. Karen could throw a fit, call the HOA, even call the cops, but they couldn't touch it. She couldn't touch it. Not legally, anyway. And just to twist the knife a little deeper, I placed a small plaque right above the engraving that said, "Dedicated to Karen. May you always step away from the trash can." The first time she saw it, she nearly fainted. She was walking her dog, trying to pretend like nothing had happened, when her eyes landed on that shiny steel monster sitting proudly in its little enclosure. She stopped dead in her tracks, her jaw dropping as she read the plaque. For a second, I thought she might actually cry. Instead, she spun on her heel and stormed off without a word, her dog trotting behind her like it knew its owner had been defeated. After that, Karen kept her distance. No more trash can wars. No more HOA harassment. No more late-night ninja missions. She even stopped coming to community events. Last I heard, she put her house on the market and moved to another neighborhood, hopefully one without trash cans. As for me, I kept the stainless steel beast, and every time I take out the trash, I smile, because that can isn't just a trash can, it's a trophy, a symbol of victory, proof that sometimes, when life knocks over your trash, you build a better one, and make sure your enemies never forget it.